Activist Radio is on the air. You have tuned into the Mark Harrington Show, sponsored by Created Equal. Mark is training a new generation of leaders to take on the culture of death and win.
You don't like abortion, don't have one.
The only thing that can be said to be objective truth is that there is no objective truth.
It does come out in one piece. It comes out in one piece.
I would argue that we certainly are not all created equal.
And now, here's Mark.
So here's a question for you. Should Christians sue? Should Christians sue? Should Christians defend our rights as citizens of the United States? You're listening to your radio activist and voice of resistance, Mark Harrington, coming to you from the Created Equal studios here in the Midwest. You can find out more about the radio program by going to markharrington.org. I'm also the president and founder of Created Equal. To find out more about our pro-life mission, go to createdequal.org. So we're going to be talking about that today. Should Christians sue? Should they exercise their rights as citizens? And we're going to be talking to Rob Muse, my good friend from the American Freedom Law Center, about this today, as well as the lawsuit that we have now filed with the city of Detroit. So just to introduce things, I want to take a moment and just deal with this issue up front. I think the Bible brings us some clarity on this, some guidance. If we just look at the life of the Apostle Paul in the book of Acts, in at least two places, the Apostle Paul exercises his rights as a Roman citizen. Now, Paul was born into that as a Roman, so he used that citizenship and he exercised his rights and appealed to Caesar because of those rights in order to avoid being killed. The Apostle Paul in Acts 22 and Acts 25 appeals to Caesar and talks about his rights and exercises those rights in order to keep himself from being killed. So as a Roman citizen, he had some protections and some privileges that he exercised. A couple of those, just for the sake of informing you folks, is as a Roman citizen, you could vote, you could run for office, you could sue, you were given a trial. So these are some of the privileges and rights that Roman citizens got back in the days of the Apostle Paul. So if we look at the Bible, we see some guidance here with the life of the Apostle Paul. And so it is with us. As Christians, we should exercise our rights. Now, I understand as Christians, we have dual citizenship, don't we? We're citizens of the earth, but we're also citizens of heaven. Ultimately, that's our destination. We have dual citizenship, but we should exercise our rights as citizens as well, as long as we're here on the earth. And that's what we're doing, folks. At Created Equal, we often find ourselves bumping up against oppression, against tyranny, against governments and others trying to silence our voices, and we use our rights as U.S. citizens to protect us from that type of treatment. And as if you've been following our ministry here most recently, you know we've been going to the presidential debates. We went to Detroit, we went to Houston, and now we'll be going to the one here in our own hometown in Columbus on October 15 to exercise our rights of free speech and to reach out and conduct outreach to bring awareness to the abortion issue to those who enter these debates and those who are actually debating, the candidates themselves. And we found ourselves in a situation there in Detroit where our rights to free speech and other rights were infringed upon. And if you watch the video that's on our website and on YouTube, you'll see that. And so afterwards, I called up my good friend Rob Muse at American Freedom Law Center, and based on the facts and everything that we thought took place that day, we decided to sue the city of Detroit. And so that's where we are. And that's why I'd like to bring Rob Muse onto the program here. He is the co-founder, and senior counsel at the American Freedom Law Center. Rob, thanks for being on the Mark Harrington Show.
Hey, Mark, great to be with you again.
And Mark, just so you know, folks, Rob and I go way back. Rob represented us in 2001, way back then, in a case with the Center for Bioethical Reform, the group I was with prior to Created Equal, in Springboro, Ohio, in a case, and we won that as well. So, Rob, tell us what's going on here. We've talked about this. You have filed a lawsuit against the city of Detroit. Bring our listeners and viewers up to speed as to why we're doing this.
Right, and let me just drop a footnote with that city of Springboro case that you mentioned in 2001. We won that case in the U.S. Court of Appeals for the Sixth Circuit. So a federal appellate court decision carries great weight, and I can't tell you how many times I've cited that case as precedent to help others who are being threatened by law enforcement for exercising their rights. So to go almost back to that point you were making in your opening, these cases are very important, not just for you, because we're a public interest law firm, and we don't just take cases that are in the private interest, meaning we don't just represent typical cases where somebody might have a dispute with another person over a contract or something. We take cases that are in the broad public interest that reaffirm and protect fundamental constitutional rights. That case was one of them in the city of Springboro, which again we won, and I've used many, many times. And this case in Detroit is the same. So while certainly you are our clients and your rights are the ones that were violated, and I think you would agree as well, you're not just doing this for Mark Harrington, or even for Created Equal. You're doing this for all other, not only pro-lifers, but for all Americans who cherish our fundamental freedoms. Right?
No doubt.
Freedom wasn't handed down to us through the bloodstream. They must be fought for and protected unless they become extinct within a generation. That's almost a direct quote from Ronald Reagan. And so that's why, I'm a public interest law firm, and why we take these cases, and why it's important for us to defend what you're doing, because it helps other pro-lifers as well. And we know in these Democrat debates in particular, and here in Detroit, you have a left-leaning city, Detroit. Michigan is going to be a hot spot for this upcoming elections. The primary and the general elections is going to be a place where candidates stop frequently. And the city of Detroit, through the police department, decided that they were going to impose these draconian speech restrictions that would essentially silence your message in what are known as traditional public forums, the public street and the public sidewalks, where your rights to freedom of speech are most protected. And I know when you reached out to me, you sent me a copy of that video, which I know your listeners and viewers can go to your website and watch. And that was outrageous when I saw that video, and that started our conversation and putting together all the facts for this lawsuit against the city of Detroit. And it was clear that they had an animus against you because of your particular views, the way they treated you, the way they treated you in particular when they put you in handcuffs and threatened to arrest you for nothing more than wanting to hold signs, pro-life signs outside of a presidential debate where we all know the Democrat candidates, every one of them across that stage, are hardcore, supporters of abortion, even late-term abortion. So it's important that your voice be heard, and the city of Detroit wanted to silence it, and the Constitution doesn't allow them to do that, and so we filed a federal lawsuit and U.S. District Court for the Eastern District of Michigan.
Again, my guest is Rob Muse. He's the co-founder and senior counsel at the American Freedom Law Center, and you can go to AmericanFreedomLawCenter.org to find out more about them. And folks, I ask you to donate to their work because they do this pro bono. They support and defend groups like Created Equal and myself free of charge, and they need financial support. So go to AmericanFreedomLawCenter.org. To give you a little of the backstory, so this was several weeks ago in Detroit. The presidential debates were happening as usual, and as normally things that we do here at Created Equal, we go where people go, where the issue of abortion might be debated. It doesn't matter whether it's a political debate or it's a college campus, a high school campus. It really doesn't matter where it is. We go where people go, where the debate is happening. So we went up there, and I've been to a few of these in the past. I've been to conventions, party conventions, national conventions. And this was, I tell you what, I've never seen anything like it. They had blocked off almost 2 blocks away from the Fox Theater and prohibited any access to those who did not hold a ticket, so to speak. We tried several points to get in. It wouldn't let us. At one point, we went to a spot which was outside the barrier, and we were told we weren't allowed to be there. And if you watch the video, you'll see that's when they detained me and handcuffed me because we didn't want to get arrested. They released us. But over 2 days, there was a series of events in which we were mistreated, our rights were crushed, and we were treated differently than all the rest of the protesters. And that's why we're filing this lawsuit. And, I get a little pushback here, Rob, and people saying, well, we should just go along to get along. We should just not push back on this kind of thing. It doesn't really advance the ball. You're only making enemies. How do you respond to that? I know we've kind of addressed this and the idea that we are not just thinking about ourselves, we're thinking about future generations of Americans. How do you deal with that? Because I know as Christians, we're supposed to be meek and mild, and we're supposed to be kind, winsome. We can be all those things, but it's essential that we have the public square.
No, it's absolutely essential. And, when you look at the forces out there, particularly those that promote the culture of death, what they're trying to do is they want to hide you, right? They want to hide your message. They want to silence you. The right to freedom of speech is not the right to catharsis, meaning it's not you just going in a closet, shutting the door and expressing your message to a nobody, right? The whole point of the right to freedom of speech is, as you mentioned, to get out to the people, because the purpose of the right to freedom of speech is to influence public opinion. And then that's the way you change public policies, by changing public opinion. And and we know the abortion industry, one of their primary tactics is to just keep this veil, it wants to be hidden behind this veil where they put out, words like choice and women's rights, and they don't want you to see what goes on behind that veil. And without people like you out there showing them what the truth of abortion is, and to address these people, and I've seen you in action. You're very civil, you're very loving towards these people, and you just want to express them to show them the truth, right? And so what is the forces of evil doing through, in this case, the city of Detroit and the police department, is they want to hide that truth. We are called as Christians, right, not to keep that light under a bushel basket. Right. We know that from Scripture. We got to be the salt of the earth. How do you do that if we're going to be relegated, into the dark corner? Right? They want to keep that bushel basket over our light, and we need to make sure that light shines bright. And the way we do it is you don't engage in, civil disobedience, as it were, breaking laws, as it were. We do it the way that our civil system is set up. Is we're exercising our rights, you're exercising your rights. I'm just an advocate for you to do that in a court of law, because we do have fundamental protections in this country. And Ronald Reagan was so correct. If we don't exercise these, so those Christians that are listening that want to be meek, mild, and not exercise their rights, you're going to lose them. It's as simple as that. If you're not constantly exercising them and constantly fighting for them, they're going to slowly but surely be eroded. And the next thing you know, you're looking around, you're like, okay, so why, what's happening to us Christians? Certainly we're called to be martyrs in a sense, but we're also called to be soldiers for Christ, to be out there.
And of course we're willing to suffer injustice. We're willing to do what's necessary, go to jail if necessary. We understand that things aren't fair. They're not going to be fair on this side of eternity. But as far as social reform goes, and the idea that if we're going to make change hearts and minds, change culture, change politics, freedom of speech is essential for that. I mean, and we take it for granted here in America that we have that, but people around the world don't have these expressive rights. They don't have an opportunity to redress grievances like we do. And I think we need to fight for those rights for future generations of Americans in order to express themselves. The other thing is the gospel. The freedom of speech and the spreading of the gospel go hand in hand. Now, people say, well, in countries where there's great persecution and you don't have these rights, Christianity is spreading. Okay, true, but what would you rather have? I mean, would you rather be in jail all the time and not being out in front of people expressing yourself, or be in a country where you can express yourself? We need to take advantage of the First Amendment and for our freedom of speech here in order to make change and in order to spread the gospel. And that's what we're doing. I hope Christians understand that. We're not just looking for lawsuits. Believe me, I don't want to be in court. You don't want to be in court if we can avoid it. But when we need to go to court sometimes.
No, absolutely. You know, that the right to freedom of speech is indispensable. It just absolutely is essential, and it's one of the things that distinguishes us from so many other countries. And to be able to get the gospel message out there, to get the culture of life, the pro-life message out there. And what we're seeing, right, on the left, they want to silence you, and they do it in so many different ways. And here you have, police state tactics where you have police officers, armed police officers threatening it, but you also have other ways which might be a little bit more subtle, but equally as suppressing of speech. They want to start labeling, if you're a Christian, right, it's hate speech, right? How dare you show this, picture of an aborted baby to somebody? That's hate speech. It's all this effort to sort of marginalize, not just sort of, but to marginalize our message, to silence it, and to push us out into the fringe. And we have to be out there. We have to be the light of the world. You mentioned social reform movements. There's not one social reform movement that's had any success that I'm aware of that didn't show the graphic effects of the injustice. Right. If you're only allowed to talk about abortion in sterile terms and using terms like choice and fetus and not being able to show what the actual outcome of this choice is, that aborted baby, and to actually to show what is impossible to express in words through these images, you're handcuffed in this debate. You're not allowed to actually express the truth. That's not Christian, hiding the truth. And it's funny because I remember back when Pontius Pilate, there he is staring Jesus in the eyes, the personification of truth, right? And he asked the question, what is truth, right? And they want to take truth. They want to take the gospel, and they want to take Christ, they want to take Christians, and they want to extinguish us, they want to put us in the margins, they want to keep us in the dark. And thankfully, we have laws that we can push back with, and that being principally the First Amendment. And the thing to remember, our founding fathers, when they drafted the Bill of Rights, obviously the First Amendment is the first of those rights. The Bill of Rights isn't the government conferring upon us any rights or privileges.
Right.
These are rights and privileges that we have. They're inalienable. These are God-given rights to be able to express ourselves and exercise our religion. And the First Amendment is a break on the government's ability to infringe upon that. So what you're doing, you're exercising what you really have as an inalienable right to be out there to spread the truth, to turn people away from evil. And yet you have the state that doesn't want you to do that, and we have a way to remedy that civilly through a civil rights lawsuit, which is what we filed.
Again, my guest is Rob Muse. He's a co-founder and senior counsel at the American Freedom Law Center. Go to AmericanFreedomLawCenter.org to find out more. As you know, Rob, Detroit's not the only city we went to. We went to Houston. It's a tale of two cities. There were still some things in Houston that were not right, but they weren't anything like what happened in Detroit. In Detroit, I mean, I don't understand, honestly, why a city feels they have to go to these measures. Now, I'm with you that this is all about sterilizing the environment, the media, not letting the candidates see what, the opposition, not reaching the people. But I mean, 2 full blocks almost around the Fox Theater, we weren't even able to get close. And then they create these what they call free speech zones, or I call them pens, where they just say, well, oh, you're a protest. Oh, you go over there, and then I asked them, well, how do you know we're for or against? And of course, they're not supposed to be picking sides. I mean, just the fact that we're showing an abortion photo, I guess they somehow presumed that we're in opposition. And that's the thing. Why can't they just let people express themselves and give us access? I just don't get it. I mean, we're no threat to anybody. We're no threat to anybody. We're not going to do anything violent. We're not. We're there just to do what any average American does every single day of their lives, and that is express themselves. It just seems like a total overreach. This is draconian.
No, absolutely. And, the way the law doesn't, totally tie the hands of the government. If they have serious safety concerns and restrictions, they're allowed to put in place content neutral restrictions, meaning that it shouldn't matter whether you're pro-life or pro-abortion, but as you just stated, I mean, in this case, they were making viewpoint distinctions, but they can put in place content neutral restrictions, and the way the law reads is that it has to be narrowly tailored to serve a significant government interest and leave open ample alternative channels of communications to allow you to reach your audience. So if they had concerns about a car bomb, for example, well, sure, don't allow the vehicles to drive, down the street.
Or have you pass through a metal detector or something, which they didn't do.
None of that. And, it's very interesting. Not only did and then they create these, designated speech areas, as you said, the pen, but even beyond that, they divided it up. If you have a message that the police officers subjectively believed was contrary to what the candidates' views were, you stood on one side of the street, which, by the way, was a favorable location because it was within view of the Fox Theater. And if you were somebody who had a view that was contrary to the Democratic candidates, then you had to stand on the other side of the street, which was around the corner, out of view. Just, you were sent to timeout, essentially. And again, it's not the right to catharsis. It's not just, we let you stand with the sign on the public sidewalk. No, we went there with our signs for a reason. We wanted to influence the people who were on that debate stage, who were attending that debate. The other thing they did is they had all the media tents out there, right? And this was nationally televised by CNN. And so, so they could get all their beautiful shots of the Fox Theater and show how calm and peaceful everything was out there. They moved you guys out of the way. They didn't want any of your pictures on top of that to be captured at all in the CNN's shot. And
it has it has everything to do with abortion, has everything to do with the victim photos. They don't want people to see it. They don't want to think that show people that there's opposition to the Democrats. They kept the people away. I mean, we never even saw anybody that got inside. We were kept so far away from the place. It was just absurd. I mean, it was out of control.
And one of the other things, is, as you had mentioned, it's almost patronizing in what they did. They said, okay, at one point, once everybody was secure inside, the place was locked down, so there was no media outside. They said, okay, we're going to now march you, give you 5 minutes, march quickly across the front of the Fox Theater, and divide you up again by whether you were pro-Democrat or anti-Democrat message based on the police. The pros went first, then you guys went, and then, okay, all right, and then they sit back and they just wash their hands and they say, see, we let you exercise your right to free speech. That's not exercising your right to free speech. If anything, that undermined their concern that there was a safety risk with any of you.
Agreed.
If there was a safety risk, then why were they allowed you to walk past when everybody
they were just trying to throw us a crumb. They were giving us the crumbs off the table to hopefully get me to shut up and not sue the city or whatever. Rob, we got about 2 minutes. Here's the thing. We're heading into an election season. Actually, we're right in the thick of it, to be honest.
Yes.
The debates are happening. There's several more of these. We're going to continue to go to them. We have this one happening right down the street here. I mean, in 10 minutes from where I sit right today is the next presidential debate. And I'm going to make certain that the city of Westerville, which is hosting the city, they're on notice. They know that we've sued the city of Detroit. They're on notice, and that's important. They're on notice. They cannot crush our free speech rights, and I hope it sends ripples going forward to the debates, to the national conventions, that these folks can't just cleanse the whole city and create these so-called free speech zones and keep us away from the people we want to reach. So it is far-reaching in what we're doing, and we're right. I think it's appropriate that it happen now, because now we've got about a year and a half of this is just going to be all the news. So if you would wrap things up for our listeners, explain why it's important, what we're doing, and exhort us to continue to fight, not only for the preborn, but for our rights to defend them.
No, absolutely. As I stated previously, this case is in the public interest, even beyond just the right of pro-lifers, but everybody to exercise their freedoms. These elections are so important, so consequential. And it's the time when the right to freedom of speech needs to be at its, protected at its highest, not suppressed as these, left-leaning cities want to do. And so you're right. And the reason why we're filing now, and we want to, be loud and clear about this, is we want these other cities to take notice that, look, we're not just going to roll over and let you trample on our rights. We're going to stand up and we're going to fight for those freedoms because they're worth fighting for, as we know.
And they got to know it. So they're going to be on notice. They want a lawsuit, they'll get it. I mean, that's just how it works. And we hope not to have to go that route, but we're prepared to do so. You've been listening to the Mark Harrington Show, your radio activist here, and your voice of resistance. My guest today has been Rob Muse, co-founder and senior counsel of the American Freedom Law Center. Go to AmericanFreedomLawCenter.org to find out more and support Rob and his work. He's doing great work for groups like us and for future generations of Christians and pro-lifers defending free speech. We'll see you next time. God bless you. God bless America. And remember, America, to bless God.
You've been listening to Mark Harrington, your radio activist. For more information on how to become a witness against the evil plague in America, call Created Equal at 614-269-7808, 614-269-7808, or go online to createdequal.net, createdequal.net. Be sure to tune to the Mark Harrington Show next time for your marching orders in the culture war.